Welcome to the Academy of Esports podcast. I'm your host, James O'Hagan, and this week I have Tim Kitzrow. Now, a lot of people may not know Tim's name, but you've definitely heard his voice, especially when I do the Esports EDU chats, because
he's on fire
is a typical sound that I use as a drop, but I actually have the person who created that voice, that iconic voice, Tim Kitzrow. Thank you for being a guest today on the Academy of Esports podcast.
Welcome to the Academy of Esports with James O'Hagan. He's on fire. Boom shakalaka. How you doing, James?
Okay, so I'm just going to have to clip that later and just keep that because that's going to be the new lead-in. I am doing fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and do the podcast with me because, again, shoutcasting and broadcasting is such an integral part of video games, and you have, or at least it has become, but you really are the person who kind of said, I'm going to put a sound to a game, NBA Jam, that became, again, iconic. I mean, when I was in college, or actually my senior year of high school is when it came out, and the sounds of your voice became things that are used. That's got to be really, I don't know, you must have felt very surprised to find all these people just so interested in this, what seems like a very simple 2-on-2 basketball game, because there have been basketball games before, but nothing like this.
Yeah, I think Arch Rivals was the predecessor at Midway, and that was still animated. And that was done by the same Brian Colin, who did Rampage and a bunch of other great games there. So the technology was changing, advancing so quickly. They finally had the ability to do motion capture, and you saw that first appear in Mortal Kombat. There are other games like Narc, Total Carnage, Smash TV were still animated and digitally animated. So this was an opportunity for them to get what at the time was state-of-the-art sim, recreation of actual basketball bodies on the court. And they got some DePaul basketball students to wire up to the motion capture and got them in front of a blue screen. And so the moves for the first time were more realistic. They took pains to digitally, recreate their faces based on pictures from a lot of NBA magazines. That's how they got a lot of the faces. And then the digital artists worked with them. So now when you look back, it looks like it was a style to be more animated or cartoonish because today's, graphics are just so real. The last NBA Jam I did with EA Sports, of course, they just clipped actual photographs of the players and put them on the bodies. So you had the more realistic faces, but it was the first chance that the kids had to be their NBA favorite, star, to have that avatar experience where for a quarter you could become Shaquille O'Neal and you could become Gary Payton or whoever it was. So this was a whole new way to experience game playing and the NBA, and you became more familiar with teams and players that normally you wouldn't because the NBA had a limited outlet with basically the NBA on NBC. Before that, CBS Sports. You didn't have the NBA Network and games and the League Pass or whatever. So most people just saw the Lakers, the Celtics, the Bulls, the handful of the top teams at the time. So people were really discovering NBA teams and players, as I said, and helping the league itself grow at the time. I've had people, podcasts all over the world, in South America, Argentina, where people said this was our only a door into the NBA through NBA Jam. So Australia, the same thing. And then in country, also, even in the United States, NBA finals were even delayed broadcast. Often, it wasn't as popular. So certainly overseas, you're not getting, any NBA telecast. So it was an exciting time to be part of the '90s NBA culture, which was just blowing up. Magic and Bird had taken the new level, and then you had Jordan and Shaq and all these people coming in. So it was right in that change to it just going global and becoming the league we know it is today.
Well, even just recently seeing how Zion Williamson made a telephone call to EA because he was upset with his rating. That's something that I think a lot of people don't realize is back even before NBA Jam, because you just talked about how, yes, you could, pick on a player based off how they play, their 3-point shooting abilities, dunk abilities, things like that. Before that, even with Madden, I mean, it was mostly just the players were numbers, and you knew who the number was, but you didn't necessarily know every player. As you said, and again, it was 2-on-2. So I think you had about 5 choices to pick, except for Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan never showed up on NBA Jam, but it was really interesting how you could mix and match even your players and find that fit of what was going to be for your style of play. My favorite to play was the Golden State Warriors because you had Tim Hardaway and Chris Mullin. Those were my 2 that I liked to use. Mitch Richmond, I think, was still with them then. But yeah, it was so new and different, and it also translated so well to console play. Like I remember in college those late nights of playing this game, and again, your voice as part of that console game, which normally console games and video arcade games didn't match up. There was a quality difference usually. There was something a little bit off between the two in the translations. Yours was probably one of those first games that was a perfect port between the console and the video game, which was a huge plus as well too, I'm sure, for you and your exposure in all of this.
Yeah, actually one of the consoles did not have music during gameplay. I always forget which one, but I thought that was a rather odd choice for whether it was Sega or Nintendo. But during gameplay, you just hear the squeak of the sneakers and the dribbling of the basketball. It did translate well, and of course, then that reached the whole. That's why the popularity today, I think, is so great, because the first incarnation of the game was, of course, at the arcades. It made $1 billion that year. So if you think of Jurassic Park being the top box office movie at the time, made about $357 million. So we outdid that by 3 times. So a lot of people got their experience at the arcade, but then the whole new generation, the kids got it at home, played it for years with their family, sister, friends. And that's why, as I said, I think it's so popular today. And now parents are taking out their cartridges, the kids are playing them. It's kind of like Beatle music being passed to new generation. When I do trade shows, game shows, there's always a lot of 40-year-olds, because that was kind of the sweet spot. They were young when it came out, and they're coming in with their kids like, hey, you're the guy who says boom shakalaka. So there's a new fan base out there. But there's really never been another game like it, because it broke a lot of rules. It was actually supposed to be, as I said, a sim game for the time. But because there was a lot of creativity going on out there, and not a lot of people telling the game designers how to make a game, what the rules were, they were just having fun in their office. And Eugene Jarvis, one of the great designers of all time, came in and saw when they were setting up some of the dunks. He goes, just for the fun of it, he goes, make them jump a little higher. So he jumped a little higher, and they kind of snicker, make them jump higher. And before you know it, he's 20 feet over the backboard and doing somersaults, and everybody's laughing. And one of the guys on the team, Sal DeVita, the co-creator, was like, no, not going to have it. This is a sim game that's ridiculous, a joke. People aren't going to buy it. And so they fought on it, but they realized that they had something special, that also they wanted to give the player something to be excited about when you caught fire. When you make 2, you're heating up, you catch on fire with 3, you go on fire. So that was like, keep feeding the quarters. It's like the Easter eggs or the power-ups today. So they were putting that into a sports game in an early time, and that was part of the addiction to take advantage of being on fire. And then also just to put in the quarters on the arcade, it was like the virtual playground. People just lined up, 10 or 20 people, like I got next. And it's still popular at all the arcades. It's one of the biggest draws in every arcade I go. People say this is the most popular game, and on a Friday, Saturday night, you can't get near the cabinet. So it was something special, and still is.
Well, and again, it was one of those games too, where even if they shut off the game, because of how you could input your initials into the system, you could find where you played before. So you could walk back up. Right. You didn't have to, spend $20 in quarters in a night, though I'm sure
get back people, to the top. Right.
Which was great as well too. And he talked about some of the Easter eggs, the big head play, just being able to adjust those things. And it's funny you call it a simulator, because it wasn't just the big head play, but like there's shoving, it's like push a guy into the stands, and there's really no offsides or out of bounds or anything like that in the game, which was also fascinating. And again, this came from, you said $1 billion in 1 year. Yep. And this came from not Nintendo, not EA, not Sega, which was the big one of the big ones at the time. Midway, which was a great arcade company, but wasn't really the one who was at the top of mind when it came to arcade games, even in 1993.
Well, First of all, it's good timing because there's a documentary film about the rise and fall of Midway Games in the early 90s, and it focuses on Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, Total Carnage, a lot of those games. It just got released on Amazon Prime today, so insert coin. This is great for anybody who's ever picked up video game and has any interest, because it really gives you the history of how games were made. It's all behind the scenes, talking with the designers, the users, the critics, etc. They quickly became, with Mortal Kombat, they were already breaking the ground, as I said, with Narc, Total Carnage, Smash TV. These kind of titles were like the punk rock. These were the games that parents were scared of, and they were going to Washington to try to put parental ratings on, keep them out of kids' hands, but it was still just at the arcades. So they had a very a reverent style, over the top style. Of course, we went on to continue that style in sports play because they knew they had a hit. So NFL Blitz, sim-like for the time, but over the top late hits. A lot of just nonsense and crazy extracurricular activity, but that's what made it so popular. So they quickly did rise to become the most successful arcade company, in the world. And unfortunately, it was a short window because the home consoles were taking over. They weren't prepared to do that the way music companies didn't see Napster coming, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So they made their money by selling the hardware. They're selling NBA Jam cabinets. They get $3,000 for that, but then the guy who buys it and puts it in the arcade, is making $10,000 on it. So they were like, wow, we're kind of screwing ourselves. So they ended up doing a deal with Acclaim Video and selling the titles. So they had the rights to NBA Jam. That's when it came to Sega and Nintendo. So then they had to have a new title. So we did NBC Showtime, NBA on NBC. Then they did Hang Time, et cetera. So they Mark tried to keep the franchise going with some different names and improving upon the original.
But let's back up for a sec, because again, while Midway's story is fantastic, I'm more interested in how you got to where you were. Because again, as we are educators working with children in this space, right? Mm-hmm. There are kids who want to be shoutcasters. There are kids who want to be the voice of a game. And I think a lot of them think, and a lot of educators don't know how to harness this into this space, right? They don't, and a lot of kids, they just think like, well, I'm just having a conversation with my friends because it's so easy to stream and it's so easy to get yourself in front of a camera, or not get yourself in front of a camera, mm-hmm. but share. So you're coming up into this. I mean, you didn't just all of a sudden just show up on the scene and like, hey, I'm Tim Kitzrow and I'm the voice of Midway Games. No, you had a pathway. What were some of the early influences, I guess, that helped prepare you for stepping into this role?
First of all, classically trained as an actor at Purchase College. My roommate there was Stan Tucci. Vin Raines was in.
Oh my God, Stanley Tucci is like, if it's a Stanley Tucci movie, I'm watching it.
Yeah, so he was.
That's amazing.
He was. He was my roommate, and so we had a really talented group there at that program. There were about 30 actors, in each year. And I thought I was going to be doing classical stage work and of course, try my hand at, TV and movies, et cetera. But along the way, my passion was comedy and improv, which was a different direction. So I came out to Second City to explore that. I'd had an improv group in upstate New York. And then I wanted to do the SCTV Saturday Night Live kind of thing and get into comedy that way. But, life gives you different forks in the road. And one of them for me was, like a lot of people, you work in a restaurant and then you follow some other passions. I played drums. I always wanted to be a rock and roll drummer, as a childhood dream. And I realized that wasn't good. So I chose acting, which of course is a lot more practical. But I kept playing drums, but just to show you how by following your passion, sometimes it can still lead you on a path to success. Because of playing every weekend in a band, playing drums, I met these guys in Chicago. One of them happened to work at the pinball division, Williams, and they needed some voices for some pinball games. One of them was Mr. Howell for Gilligan's Island. And he said, well, you're a funny guy, improv guy. Can you do Mr. Howell? I go, lovely. Maybe we could bribe Kona Gilligan. And that got me in, and I did Popeye, The Twilight Zone, Attack from Mars. And World Cup soccer, NBA pinball, just kept, I became the voice of their pinball games, basically based on character voices, a lot of improvised script. So when NBA Jam came along, it was like being in Hollywood in the 20s, like the silent movies. We equate the pinball with like silent movies. Then the talkies came along, the big time, the big screen, and they said, we've got this NBA title, would you like to do it? No, they didn't audition anyone else. They just, they knew that I was a guy that had some talent. They liked, we had a good relationship. So that kind of situation will probably never happen again, where you just are in the right place. And I didn't, as I said, it wasn't through an agent, and they didn't go look for other people. This was before them thinking, oh, well, let's go get Marv Albert, either too costly, or they usually did a lot of voices in-house back then anyway. Ed Boon, the Ritchie brothers from pinball, they would often put their own voices in their games. It wasn't thought that you had to go out and find talent into agencies. And of course, now you have, movie stars. It's a very sought after profession. So I was in a fortunate spot, as I said, of having proved myself with all the work, I think 15 pinball titles, some Elvira games. So sports has always been, huge for me. Playing it, following the Bulls, Michael Jordan in '84, was just one of the pinnacle moments to see him in the Olympics, and the final game at North Carolina. So when I was in Chicago, the Bulls I just watched them like go through that real ugly period after they drafted him, losing seasons. He's getting 37 a game, but I'm playing 5 times a week at the Y. So I always, like most kids and basketball players, I always talk to myself on the court, and Kitzrow, 3 seconds left from the corner. It's good. It's like, yeah, who hasn't done that? A baseball game, 9th inning, it's 2 strikes, and he's 1 strike away from the Cubs from losing the World Series. And there's a drive way back in left field, and it's a home run. It's just like, I did that my whole life. So how much more prepared could I be? The thing that was really amazing, though, is then as we went on to NFL Blitz and other titles, I was writing the game. So now I'm incorporating my Second City background of creating content, humor, comedy. Tina Fey went on to do 30 Rock, Steve Carell doing The Office. Those were people, my contemporaries, that were at Second City at the time. So they went in that direction, but I was the only guy that had a chance to do something completely different with my background and training, which was create a voice and a character for video games. And and as far as I know, I'm the only person who's ever done the announcing for all 4 major league sports and writes my own content. So that's really the feather in the cap, is that it's not just a guy, a gun for hire, comes in and shouts to the microphone. It's that I help develop the style, the flavor, through my personal, style of humor, the things that I love. And the first NBA Jam was really a bit more generic. It was loosely based on Marv Albert, because he was the voice of the NBA. So he had great enthusiasm, a great high range. So that's why he's on fire. I had I was always shooting for that higher range in my voice. And then when we got to Blitz, Slugfest, Hits, the new NBA Jam, I found my own voice, which is Mr. Boom Shakalaka, or Grim Blitzrow in Mutant Football League. So it was a little trial and error, but once I was given the opportunity, I ran with it because I enjoy it so much. To give advice for kids today, it is amazing. You said, now everybody can sit in front of a camera. You can buy a microphone for $200 or less. So you can actually play along and train yourself, watch your, just call your own game and put it on GarageBand so you can hear back. You have your own class. You can take highlights from the NBA or NFL or whatever and sit there, and you can freeze frame it. You can write some of your own dialogue. So you can basically go to school by yourself. And then when you feel like you have something, you can put together, nice little sound file. And that's your calling card. Fortunately, as I said, I haven't had to, do that. Games still, come to me, and I don't see myself going off into the West Coast to do all the character-driven, games and first-person shooters. And my style, my voice is not unique enough for them to go, well, we got 1,000 guys out here, to play, Corporal Schmulligan or something. So, so people come to me because they want that, the bombast and I think the writing style that I become known for. But yeah, I think for anyone who wants to do this, you can have your own YouTube channel, do your own clips. When the NBA jobs started coming in for me, I hustled by just calling people on the staff. I'd go to the computer and find out who's in charge of in-game entertainment and call up. And most times you get a voicemail. So if it's James O'Hagan at the Wizards, I'd go, "You've reached James O'Hagan of the Washington Wizards. James can't come to the phone right now because he's on fire. No, seriously, he was heating up some pizza in the toaster oven and his sleeve caught fire. Leave him a message at the buzzer and you won't be rejected." Hey, James, this is Tim Kitzrow, the voice of NBA Jam, just reaching out to you, hoping you might find some time to call me back and we could put together a little throwback Thursday night with some NBA highlights. So that's how I started to hustle on my own. Then someone of your age, now that they're the guys who run the NBA in that sweet spot, I just realized, they all grew up playing NBA Jam. So I'm kind of like Santa Claus or Mick Jagger to them, They're like, they would call me back. It's like, dude, I can't believe that's really you. I thought someone was putting me on. I've been playing at the office all week. And, then the games started, the NBA games started to come in. They said, well, what do you propose? I said, send me a minute's worth of highlights, 2 minutes, whatever. And I will voice it and send it back to you. I'll give you ideas for graphics that I envisioned for the script I put together. Their graphic team, or they would subcontract out, would do the appropriate, fireball or this or that. Or for Steph Curry, what does Steph Curry have for breakfast? Snap, crackle, pop, nice crisp threes. Make them a part of your NBA diet. So I'd say, throw up the snap, crackle, pop as the ball goes through the net. And, it's just a great little partnership. But once again, as I'm telling people who are interested in doing this, you can do that on your own. Find some highlights. And you watch a play, you freeze frame it, pause. I go, what would I love to see here? What would I love to hear if I was sitting on the couch that would just be different? This is a limited time TV offer. It dices, it slices, it dunks in your face. James Harden announcing the Hardenizer. James Harden now with MVP strength. Beer sold separately. Call now and we'll throw in this free dagger at the buzzer. Boom shakalaka. Write it down, goes off, goes up on the Jumbotron, crowd goes crazy. It's like, what a fantasy. I do it in my bedroom, my office,
Not in some big studio, but just sitting here.
What world, how many years ago that was not possible at all. So, they send a file, I sit there, and it's the dream thing. And I just recommend anyone who wants to do this at all to just take different things, to take your favorite esports game, take a sports highlight, and just sit down and freeze frame it and get a pad of paper out, write some things down, create your own catchphrases or funny twists on things, little comic asides, put together a tight little minute or two and start doing YouTube clips. That's what I should be doing, giving advice to you guys. I still don't have that. I want to do that.
Well, and that's for real. I mean, again, as an educator who, the only thing that we can really say to kids to learn how to do this as an educator in schools is, drama programs. I was a part of the drama program, getting up on stage. And, a lot of getting up on stage, while, yes, there's scripts, it's your interpretation. It is your ability to, when things go bad, to be able to pick it back up. Like, I remember I was in a production of South Pacific. This is going to sound so stupid talking to a trained actor, but I was in a production of South Pacific in high school, and we had a quick close and open of a scene change. And what happened was the stage curtain hit the fan that was on my desk and knocked it onto the ground. So here is me walking around to pick this back up quickly, and the curtain opens up, and my butt is sticking out to the audience.
Yeah.
And again, this is San Francisco area. This is around 1990, and I said, "Oh, those damn earthquakes!" And I put the thing back up on in character. Didn't drop character, no. But again, it's those things like the drama programs in our schools, which are so important to get kids comfortable doing things like what we're doing right here. Band programs, being able to sit there and manipulate a three-dimensional object in front of 100 people.
Yeah,
it carries into what we're talking about here. But there's also preparation for this. How do you get yourself into the mindset of Mr. Oh, hold on, let me see if I can do it. Into the mindset of Mr. Boom Shakalaka. How do you get yourself into that mindset?
I think it's just a slow period of an organic process. I said that it's the voice that I had as a kid in the backyard, just me with my sports bombast. So every kid is, who loves sports is at some time called themselves or called, a game, with their friends or something. And actually, just a little aside, it's funny how many people tell me since they fell in love with NBA Jam that when they play, they're always saying like, he's heating up or boom shakalaka when they hit something. So my speech is they say I'm channeling your voice and your speech, when I play. But I think improv is the key, and I would recommend this to anyone in any profession. What happens in improv? You improvise with what you have. You go on a black stage. You don't need props. In reality, like a film set, what happens in great music? You improvise. That's how a great song comes together. Film, the creative process is always about listening, being in the moment, and responding in character of the situation, what's going on. You and your moments, like something happened, well, must have been an earthquake, So you're ready for anything, but you're listening. You're not just sitting thinking of your line or thinking of preparing if you're a broadcaster. What am I going to say that sounds smart? These guys last week looked like they were about to run away with the division. Just all that. I hate all that stuff. I have a respect for the broadcaster, sportscaster, that their whole life, day in, day out, every game, it's like they're in the same situation a million times. So there is this kind of Groundhog Day repetitiveness to it. So my job, why I get so excited, is I can say anything. It's like having a lucid dream. I go, I'm suddenly behind the microphone for a major league sport, and I can say anything, like Harry Carey for the Cubs used to. I always want to have a different take on things and respond to things in the moment. So when I saw, the Harden clip, I'm improvising like, well, what do I see here? I see a guy who's slicing dice. I go, it's the Dunkleizer or, the amazing Hardenizer. So in the moment when I started for the second round of EA Sports, we go to the game and I go, here's the tip. And I said something about I'm just improvising lines like about fouls, about this, about the tip. But I said, here's the ref for the tip. And the guy in the studio goes, we're not going to have a ref in this game. And I went, what? No ref? Oh, great. Real professional. Can see how this is going to go. Yeah. So they kept that in the game. So you'll have a point and, I go, where's the ref? Oh, no ref? Oh, great. Okay. All right. So I throw in those kind of asides every time I do highlights. You just, as I said, you take what's going on in the moment and run with it. So improvising is about listening, about taking in what's coming to you visually and all your senses, and not just being stuck in your own head of what am I going to say or what I've heard other people say that's going to make me sound professional or like a sportscaster. You'll develop your own style. As I said, most people can't stand the predictability, the monotone kind of delivery of so many sportscasters. It's just, you lose interest in the game real quickly. If you have a baseball team and you have bad announcers, whether it's radio or TV, there's no worse experience than to sit through the drudgery of like listening to the tedious stories, the repetition. And like the World Series, what I hate about the World Series is they get their national crew on. And in the old days, growing up in Chicago, Harry Carey, Steve Stone. And so they're familiar with every play. They're talking about the moment, in the moment, that they're having fun with it. Then it got to these, the national broadcast. Every pitch is analyzed 10 times. Well, what that one was, Larry, he just kind of came off his finger. You can see it just kind of sets it out over the plate, tailing back a little bit on the inside court. What he's going to want to do in a situation like this, he's got to go back to this. It just overanalyze the shit out of it.
Yes.
Just so have fun with it. Make it creative. Make it something you'd want to listen to. Find your voice. It's a simple thing to say, but whether you're playing an instrument, you're going to be an actor. You've got to find what you do that makes you happy first, and hope that an audience follows. You can't write music. Well, you can nowadays based on what everybody else is doing. That's why I think a lot of music is homogenized. You're trying to copy whoever else is successful. But it's the ones that break the ground that will stay and last forever. So find your own voice is best advice I can give.
Well, and that you touched on a couple of things. Actually, earlier you talked about how you called 4 different sports, and you've written content for 4 different sports. Joe Buck hasn't even done that.
Yeah.
And Joe Buck is kind of one of those people who, does football, does baseball. I don't think he does basketball or hockey.
No.
But what you just did talk about too, and let's talk about baseball for a second, because I am a White Sox fan. Sounds like you're a Cubs fan. I'm a White Sox fan. And it was the only way to describe White Sox baseball since 2005 has been hell.
Yeah.
Okay. But what has been amazing in the last couple of years is Jason Benetti and Steve Stone. And the two, I'm glad Steve Stone came to the South Side.
Steve is great.
But Jason Benetti, to me, is just, he is
Great
that
story, too. Great story. Yeah.
Well, for Homewood, Flossmoor, Southside, Chicago, and they have a radio program there. Lawrence Holmes, I know, 670 The Score came out of that as well too. Ben Bradley is another. He's a local broadcaster who came out of that program. But Benetti, even despite his cerebral palsy and his physical ailments, you would never know. I mean, that's the other beautiful thing about this is behind the microphone, behind the camera. Even if you don't have the camera on, your voice is your voice. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you look like, how you do this.
Yeah, he's got such great passion. And Steve is one of those exceptions where he is the most analytical guy, you'll ever get because he does know everything. And I actually appreciate it because he's like a savant. He predicts pitches and everything else. But he's
everything.
But it's nice when he has that balance with a good color guy, and that's why Harry Carey and Steve Stone were my favorite, because Harry was everybody's drunk uncle Cub fan, just saying whatever came into his head, and Steve did not try to correct him or they balanced each other. You had every nut and bolt about baseball, then you had every great story that Harry would tell you and reacting to fans and players in ways that you would on the couch. And so many things today are just way too dry. So yeah, I'm glad that the Sox picked. And actually, they just made a new deal. They just got our guy from why can't I think of his name?
Yeah,
right
from
now?
Television. I know. Now I'm drawing a blank too, and it's going to bother me that because I can say he's with Jim Deshays was his baseball guy. Oh, but yes, we're stealing all the Cubs' good stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be Kyle Schwarber next. So I hope.
The only sport that I couldn't really improvise on was the NHL. It's not a sport that I know well, and the precision and the pace of the game, the frenetic pace, was tough. So that was actually done up in Canada, subcontracted by a group called Black Box Studios. And you know how the Canadians love their hockey. So it was, those guys ran that show. The hardest thing in the world was to go through the rosters of hockey players, because you think of all the, 500 players, there weren't three vowels between them, all those Eastern European and, Kreshkish, Rishkish, and to try to belt out those names at top volume, if you're not completely confident, it just falls apart and explodes like a water balloon. So thousands of takes to get all those player names right. And the difference also from the early days, you run through a roster, a couple times, like Pippen. You have the three anticipatory, kind of like, bringing the dribble up court. So that was it. That's what we did. By the time we got to the hockey games, I think I was doing 17 different inflections, and also, with the wrist or from the blue, a lot of things couldn't be pasted. So we would have to do whole phrases, but it just got a lot more complicated, a lot more hard work. But, the attitude for me never changes, just to give your all on every play, as if it's the most exciting, thing in the world, because it should be. That's what sports is. You even if in a boring moment, you can tell by the broadcaster if he's into it, and you've got to infuse it with your own energy.
And I will say this is, again, I think I've tweeted at you several times that how is Tim Kitzrow not the voice of esports? Because I feel like, again, you have that voice that I think could bring a lot of excitement to things such as NBA 2K League, which NBA 2K League, I'm like, okay, when they first announced it, sounds like a great idea, right? 5-on-5 basketball, right?
Right.
You're going to play a video game. But again, for those of us who grew up with NBA Jam since 1993, that has been largely our video game. And I will argue this to anybody who will listen. Not many people will, but I will argue to people who listen. Tim Kitzrow, if he is part of the NBA 2K League, it's a whole different league, and it's a whole different. No, so I'm just giving you those props right there for.
I appreciate that. Actually, that is something I was just talking to entertainment manager about things that I would like to do, and where he would see my career going to kind of stay contemporary and not be limited by certain titles. And he said, you need to get into esports. And he goes, I've watched the 2K esports. He goes, I think it could use that shot of adrenaline that you have. He goes, already so many people would know your voice, but it doesn't matter. The reason people got to know your voice is because you're good at what you do, you're successful, you provide energy. So the new generation doesn't need to know who you are. They're going to know who you are. That was a nice thing to hear. That was very nice.
My kids know your voice.
Yeah.
My kids know,
King James is cooking like a Texas barbecue right now.
They know that. And it's not because I play it over and over or I say the phrases, it's because they've heard it. And again, it's amazing how kids just pick up on these things. And maybe taking your own advice, maybe it's taking clips of NBA 2K League and just taking the sound out and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to call this game.
Real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great idea. Hey,
I'd be happy to sit in with you and just be the straight guy in all this,
Yeah.
Well, Tim, I don't know. It's just
whatever, James. Boom shakalaka. And like rummaging through his girlfriend's top dresser drawer, James finds nothing but nylon. Kaboom! Oh, I love it when you call me Big Blocker. The block doctor is in, and we'll see you now. Boom shakalaka. Rejected. Get that stuff out of here. Like my wife always says, not tonight.
Well, Tim Kitzrow, this has been an absolute pleasure of mine. I really appreciate you giving time of this. And again, I hope that educators or students who are watching this do take the advice. So again, some of the takeaways is make it your own. Practice. I mean, I've heard practice, take your craft and make sure it's great. And as you even alluded to earlier, you don't have to start off perfect. Again, you said that first NBA Jam was not to the level of the second time around when you were able to write and do your own stuff. And again, there was the pinball games and the other experiences before that, before you got your break. I guess you could call it your break. But you are one of the iconic voices.
Oh, thank you. You know what the respect though that I have for doing live play-by-play, and people often ask, have you ever done any? I haven't. I know that if I got into it, I would kind of be back at square one, where I would have to have the vocabulary at my disposal. The phrases I'm known for without wearing them out, without getting repetitive, but staying in the moment, the frenetic pace of calling play-by-play. When I've done some NBA Jam tournaments, people say, we're going to have a tournament, we're going to put on the big screen. Will you call the game? And I said, no, I think the guy in the game is better than me because he's faster. If I try to match the speed of NBA Jam and call it like, from the corner to the left block, shut down, block, give us a, it's so much. It's just, and I've seen some people at the tournaments actually do it, grab a mic and start to do it. So it is kind of two different worlds. Doing a video game, I have the luxury of writing, like I'll take a column like dunks and I'll put down like 40, 50 expressions, for the dunk. And for alley-oops, you bring the peanut butter and I'll bring the jam. I can't go to work without my coffee and donuts. You bring the coffee and I'll bring the Dunkin'. And he just got his MBA degree from Dunkin' on You. So I've got my script now. I've written it. So now when I do the NBA stuff, I've got a lot of my favorites. And of course, then I still add on every time I see a play, I'll just come up with something new. But to do that on the fly, as much of an improviser, as I am, to do it in real time and come up with brand new stuff, like this great shot of Harden taking Rubio and doing one of his crossovers, and Rubio actually falls completely backwards. So when I saw that, I said to the guys, put in a twister mat under Rubio's body. So he's like down on a twister mat. So I go, how about a little game of twister, Rubio? Left foot green, right foot blue. How about my hot hand and your red face? Boom, shakalaka. And there it was. Like, if in real time, could I say that? But no, now I would wait for a time where a player collapses after a double dribble, and now I've got that in my repertoire. You know what I mean? But for guys who do it day in and day out, it's a tough business. But I'm telling you, for all the guys who want to come up, take my advice. I'll take your advice, and I'm going to work on the 2K stuff, because I hadn't even thought about it until just a week ago when someone mentioned that I should look into 2K. So, yeah.
And even to your credit too, I mean, you did say some of your inspiration is taken from Marv Albert.
Yeah.
I mean, Marv Albert, yes,
he's still going.
Well, he's still going, but you hear if he did what Marv Albert is known for in his calls, he would have had an aneurysm and died years ago. I mean, his brain would have exploded.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is about pacing it out too. And because again, NBA Jam, totally different thing. You got one quarter, you get one quarter, for one quarter, you get one quarter.
Yeah.
That was weird when it was in my head. I'm going, did I really just say that? But that's real. And yes, there's that high intensity 2 minutes of action, but if you're calling it live, hey, build up, have those ebbs and flows and high points and low points and all that stuff.
Absolutely. It's all like in music, anything is dynamics, it's like the pace and, you got to find your low spots to appreciate the higher spots. Like Kevin Harlan can be just going along, and all of a sudden up high and down hard or whatever. It's like, oh, it shocks you. But a lot of the style of all sports broadcasting is becoming this much more relaxed ex-player watch-along style, which now NBA TV does a lot of like a game of the week, just watch-along, like 3 or 4 guys in the studio talking as if like you're hanging out, at their house talking about the game. So you're not getting play-by-play necessarily. There are little side stories and watch what he's doing here. And it's cool to have that experience, to hear what ex-players are saying, especially I love it when they'll like do a classic game, like from the 80s or something. They'll really kind of break down and talk about the players, but it's hard for me to watch a contemporary game with guys just in conversational voices talking about the gameplay, and no one has that voice of that carnival barker that gets you revved up. So I don't know if you've seen any of those. I like Reggie Miller's style, Chris Webber, a lot of those guys. But sometimes when you get a certain group of them together without a real like a Kevin Harlan or a Marv, like there are very few of those guys left these days.
Well, and I could argue that Kevin Harlan has taken your style. So,
yeah.
I mean, there were people at ESPN who took your catchphrases and your style and used those as well too over the years. So. Hey, you, again, when I say iconic voice of video games, Tim Kitzrow, you are it. Tim Kitzrow, thank you so much for being so giving of your time today on the Academy of Esports podcast. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, James. James O'Hagan is on fire. Boom shakalaka. Peace out, brother.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAOesports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.